to the attorneys prior to them getting on the stand, and then I'm going to leave it up to the attorneys to let me know so I can instruct the media as to what that particular witness desires to have happen. So just make sure you remind me. But we are ready for opening statements. Opening statements of counsel are concise and orderly descriptions of each side's claims and defenses and the evidence counsel expects to produce in support of those claims and defenses. They are not evidence. Each side will address you once during opening statements, and the state gets to go first. So, Mr. Barnett, you are up.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, fellow counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This case is about a defendant who brought a gun to a fist fight and finished that fight by shooting the father of her child with one shot, one kill. The evidence in this case will show that on May 3rd, 2021, that Carroll County Sheriff's deputies and the Sheriff's Department received a 911 call from 6344 Arbor Road in Mechanicstown. And that 911 call was the defendant who said she shot her husband. The evidence will show that deputies responded and found her father of her child, not necessarily her husband, but the father of her child deceased in the front yard of that residence. Okay. You will hear from the deputies who took the 911 call. You'll hear from the deputies who responded to the scene. And you'll hear the investigators who ended up talking with the defendant, who told him that she shot the father of her child. This case is not a whodunit, okay? Identity is not an issue. You will hear testimony as to how the shooting occurred. And you will hear evidence that the defendant and the father of her child didn't have a healthy, normal relationship. Okay? We believe that you will hear evidence that there was a fight, and that they got into an argument, and that the defendant was assaulted. The evidence will show you that after that fight was over, though, that the decedent, Matthew Mott, left a bedroom where this fight started and was shot at the end of the hallway in the home. Okay? And you will see that, and you will hear testimony from the defendant, from her own words, which she told investigators, that she retrieved an AR-15 rifle from under the bed in the bedroom where they had fought, went to the closet in that same bedroom, retrieved the magazine, loaded that weapon, racked around into it, and then left that bedroom where Matthew Mott was at the end of the hallway, and that was when he was shot. And that Matthew Mott then ended out into the front yard where he was later found. Okay? You'll see where the shell casings were found, and you'll see that the fight at that point in time was over when she shot him. Now, you may not like Matt Mott. You may hear things that make you not like him. But when people live together, they may have unhealthy relationships. They may not be able to live with each other, and they may not be able to live without each other. But at the end of the day, an unarmed man was shot. Okay? Their fight was over. There was no reason to pull that trigger. So that toxic relationship may cause issues for you in that relationship. But ladies and gentlemen, it's no justification to shoot somebody. Now, whether you like or dislike someone is not how you're going to be instructed to decide this case. The law protects everyone from pirates to presidents. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, you have before you 2 counts of an indictment that you were going to ask to consider. Okay, and the one is, the first count is the murder. Okay, and the judge is going to instruct you at the end of this case is the purposeful killing of another. Okay? And so we believe the evidence in this case will clearly show that the defendant picked up a rifle, she loaded it, she pointed it, and she fired it. Again, not the whodunit case. Okay? You will also be asked to consider specifications to the indictment, and that is, a specification is just an additional fact that has to be proven, and so the indictment contains a specification regarding a firearm. Obviously, we believe the evidence will clearly show that the AR-15 rifle used in this case was a firearm. Okay? You also are being asked to consider a second count of felonious assault. Okay? And felonious assault, as the judge will instruct you, is the knowingly causing of physical harm by means of a deadly weapon. And ladies and gentlemen, that's in the causing or attempting to cause the physical harm in firing the weapon at another person. Okay? And so sometimes the law calls those lesser included offenses, not something that you will be instructed on at the appropriate time to consider. But they are separate counts for you to consider, so as you hear the evidence, you're going to hear evidence as to both of those counts. What this case is about is self-defense. Okay? And the judge is going to give you specific instructions at the end of this case about self-defense and what that means. And what we believe the evidence will show that when someone who shoots an unarmed person, that's an unreasonable use of that force. And that's what we're going to ask you at the conclusion of this case, when you hear all the evidence, to return a verdict of guilty, because it wasn't justified in these circumstances, because that fight was in fact over. We want you to use your common sense. We want you to follow the rules and follow the law. And we believe, again, that it's not the whodunit, but it's that the defendant was not justified whatsoever when those rules are applied. That Audrey Cole on May 3rd grabbed an AR-15 rifle from under that bed. She went to the closet. She fetched a magazine. She loaded that magazine, raised that rifle, shot Matt Mott after their fight was over, when he was some 10 feet or more away from her. That Matt wasn't on top of her. They weren't fighting at that time when he was shot. And at the close of that evidence, we believe you will be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that Audrey Cole finished that fight with Matt Mott, and that she's guilty of murder and felonious assault, and that she did in fact use a firearm to commit those offenses. Thank you.
Defense counsel.
Audrey was brutally beaten. The fight stopped for a second. She tried to escape. He came at her again, and she used deadly force. That's what happened. Earlier that day, an argument began. They share a child together, as you heard. This argument started over something that maybe was a little bit minor, and it escalated. It had to do with their daughter Selena's medication. Okay, this started to get escalated, like I said, and they're arguing, they're yelling back and forth. Audrey decides she's going to remove herself from the situation. This isn't a good relationship, and she understands how these arguments can go. So she goes to her bedroom. Now, Audrey's in the process of moving out. She's trying to buy her own house. In fact, she was in contract at this time to buy her own house. Matt knew that. Audrey was staying in this bedroom by herself. So she goes up to the bedroom to remove herself from the situation. Let's not escalate this anymore. Separates herself from the situation. So, Audrey sits on her bed by herself, looking at her phone. She's sitting on the edge of her bed, looking at her phone, minding her own business, when Matt comes up the stairs, unwilling to put this argument aside. Then he just loses his temper completely. He loses all control of his emotions. She's sitting here on the edge of her bed. He reaches over, he grabs her by the neck, he throws her off a wall, okay? Her head goes through the wall. You're gonna see it. A nice, perfectly head-sized shape through the wall. Matt's a lot larger than Audrey. He's got her on the ground, and he begins punching her in the head. She does what she can. She tries to block it, puts her arms up, tucks her chin. She takes punches to her arms, she takes punches to her head, to her face. She's terrified. Now, by the grace of God, Matt does quit beating her. She couldn't do anything at that point to stop him. Matt leaves, and as he does, he tells her, "It's no wonder your dad used to beat your mom, because you guys just don't know when to shut up." She's terrified. He walks out of the door. She's crying. She's just been beaten. Her head hurts. She's been thrown through a wall. She's been punched. She's bruised. She's laying there on the floor. She keeps her AR underneath her bed. Her only thought is, "I need to get out of here." She grabs her AR. She keeps the ammunition separate because they got a young child in the house. Grabs the AR, gets the ammunition out of the closet, loads the gun. Her only thought at this point is, "I need to get out of here." She doesn't know if Matt's still there. Matt's gone. Is he downstairs? She does know he keeps guns downstairs in the kitchen. She takes a step or two out of her bed into the hall, and that's when Matt comes around the corner. Matt comes around the corner. She sees him. He sees her, and he comes at her again just the way he did moments before when he brutally beat her and caused her serious physical harm. As soon as that happened, she fires one shot. He yells, he leaves. She doesn't know where he's going. She doesn't know if she's safe yet. She follows. She goes outside, doesn't initially see him, comes back in. She calls her mom. Says, "Mom, I just shot Matt. I need to call 911. She calls 911. She gives the operator on 911 a recount of what happened, does her best to maintain her composure. She does a pretty good job. This is obviously a traumatic situation. She's former military. I think she does a pretty good job at this. 911 operator asks, "Is he outside?" She goes, confirms he's outside. And then she goes and gives him CPR and awaits for the medics and police to come. Medics and police come. She tells them exactly what happened. And this is in moments after she's just been brutally beaten and had to shoot somebody because she was trying to escape. It's a traumatic experience. She's taken to the hospital. She's treated for several hours. Then she ends up giving an interview, recorded interview, for about an hour with an investigator and deputy. She tells them everything that's happened. I'm going to say it was weeks later, she agrees to do another interview with them. Again, recorded, tells them everything that's happened again. Each time, everything has been consistent, and the evidence that you're going to hear is consistent with what she's told deputies, investigators, whoever has listened to her. Her struggle is, what was I supposed to do? She said this to the investigator. I don't know what else I could have done, and I don't either. At the end of this, we're going to ask you to find her not guilty.
At this time, we have two options. We can keep going with testimony, or we can break for lunch. The state of Ohio, I don't know how long you anticipate your first witness to be.
We need to go on the work to make availability.
So you'd prefer to take a lunch break right now, get the time to get everything in order? All right, I think that's probably the best course of action. We're going to take a recess for lunch. When we come back, we'll start in with testimony. So you need to remember what I told you during instructions for breaks. You guys are permitted to leave the courthouse for lunch. No talking about the case with anybody else at this point. If anybody comes up to you and wants to talk to you about the case, you need to report that right away as soon as you get back to the courthouse. I've given you the instructions on cell phones and your own research and that sort of thing, so please remember those instructions. We will start at 1 o'clock, so it's 12 o'clock now. We'll be back promptly at 1 o'clock. Anything else at this point from either counsel? Okay, so I'm going to dismiss the jury for now. You guys are free to go to lunch. Be back in time for the 1 o'clock. All right, everybody else, you are dismissed. Do you have a question? Looks like you do. Okay, very good then. Record on the State of Ohio versus Audrey Cole is 21 CR 6643. At this point, we've gotten through opening statements. So State of Ohio, call your first witness.
State would call Josie.
Go ahead and stand over there and raise your right arm.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. You may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, would you tell us your name and the address of your employer, please?
My name is Josie Day. The address of the office is 43 2nd Street Southeast, Carrollton, Ohio, 44615.
Okay. Who do you work for?
Sheriff Williams, Carroll County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And what do you do at the?
I work in the Communications Division as a 911 dispatcher.
Okay. How long have you been a 911 dispatcher?
I got full-time in May 26th of 2019. I started part-time in 2018, August.
Okay. And what's your current position now?
A 911 dispatcher.
Okay. Are you full-time or are you part-time?
Full-time.
Okay. And what are the duties that a 911 dispatcher does here in Carroll County?
My main duties require me to answer 911 calls as well as non-emergency calls and obtain pertinent information from the callers to quickly dispatch the correct emergency service or services to the correct location and or transfer them to the correct agency for them to do so.
Okay. And did you receive any training to have that position?
I did. Upon hire, I had to complete and certify for emergency medical dispatching within 6 months. I am CPR certified. I have to recertify every 2 years to stay current. And yearly by the state, we're required to do 8 hours of minimum continuous education training.
Okay, and when you say continuous education, what kinds of things are you continually being educated on?
We can pretty much do anything. There's some things that our supervisor and 911 coordinators send us to do training on. It could be anything from workplace harassment to police pursuits, anything pretty much that we could.
Would those include topics that come up in the course of
Our job?
Of your job? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Did you receive any specialized training in how to be a 911 dispatcher? Was there a special school that you go to, or is there, or is it just
No.
on-the-job training?
No, there is, we have to sign off. We are trained for 6 months. We have to sign off on everything that we learn to make sure that we understand it. Answering 911 calls, like emergency medical dispatching, the certification for that. We have to sign off that we are comfortable with learning how to do everything, and we have to go through scenarios and calls and basically pass a test to certify for that, to do our job.
Okay.
And if
And
we can't pass the test, then we don't get hired.
Okay, so there is testing, there is
Yes.
education and a testing
Yes.
component. And the question is your education and your testing current?
Yes,
Is it in good standing?
yes.
Okay, and so, I guess, tell us what dispatch is.
What dispatch is?
Yeah, where you work or how it works. How is a 911 call received?
The individual, the civilian calls in and we answer it and we get their name, address, and location and what is going on.
Okay, and what do you do with that information?
We have to log and input it into our our computer system known as CAD.
Okay, and what does CAD stand for? If you know.
I can't remember at
Okay.
this time.
So, but is it a way that calls are recorded or logged?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what happens to that information once you log it?
it goes into the CAD system for, I mean, it's public knowledge, but some things are redacted for personal reasons, like the social security number, stuff like that we input into it are redacted when we give it to the public, but it's for our officers and the public.
Okay, so you receive information and you document it somehow?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's a record that's kept of that, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so when you say you enter it into your CAD system, is that some type of computer?
Yes.
Okay, and so is that how a record is made?
Yes.
Okay, and what about the actual call that somebody actually makes? Is it databased or is it logged somehow?
Yes, all of our calls are recorded, 911 and non-emergency calls.
Okay, and so what happens to those recordings? Where are they kept?
Our 911 coordinator keeps track of all those calls.
Okay. Okay. Why do you record your calls?
So we know exactly, it's more of a record to state exactly what they're stating, so we can't try to change what they had said or stated or anything like that. In our way, how we interpret things, we actually know what they said by what they're stating, and we can go back and listen to it. And there's some things that come up in court that happened 6 months, 2 years ago, things like that. We can go back on them and know exactly what they said. So it's just a record to keep things more accurate.
Okay. Do you know how long those records are kept or the calls are kept?
I don't know.
Okay. Are you responsible in any way of removing items or doing any record-keeping purposes in the administration of those recordings, or whether it's the CAD or whether it's the recording?
Me personally, I'm not responsible for that.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to ask you, can you recall May 3rd, 2021?
Yes,
Were you working that day?
I was.
Were you working at the Carroll County Sheriff's Department?
I was.
And were you a dispatcher on that day?
I was.
Do you remember what shift you were working?
Afternoon shift.
Okay, and what hours of the day is the afternoon shift?
I believe that day I worked from 3 to 11,
Okay,
but
well,
our other afternoon shift is 2 to 10.
Okay, so there's two different afternoon shifts.
Yes.
Okay, so when you say the time frames, is that in the morning or in the afternoon?
Afternoon.
Okay, and so do you recall, again, what shift you were working that night?
3 to 11.
Okay, and during a normal shift and a shift on that night, are you alone or by yourself?
I am not. We always are required to have another dispatcher with us.
Okay, was there another dispatcher there with you that night?
There was.
Okay, and on that night, did you have the occasion to answer a 911 call from 6344 Arbor Road?
Yes.
And what was, can you tell us how the call came in?
The call came in on 911. I answered, and I asked the individual their name, their address, their phone number, and what was going on.
Okay, what was the nature of the call?
I answered the call. There was a female who stated that at 6344 Arbor Road, that her boyfriend was hitting her in the head and she shot him.
Okay. How did you know the call came from 6344 Arbor Road?
It populated on our map as well as she told me the address.
Okay, and when you mean by population, what does that happen? What does that entail?
So when we receive a 911 call, we have an automated location system that automatically populates 911 calls after 30 seconds or so.
Okay, and how is it populated? How do you know that it's populated?
I can see it on my mapping system.
Okay, so you have a mapping system. Could you describe for the jury what that mapping system looks like?
It basically looks like the satellite view on Google Maps, pretty much. We can see the top view, not very much a street view, but we can see the top view of all the addresses, and they're specifically, they have the addresses right on top of the housing or driveway, and all the road names, state routes, and they're marked individually with what they are.
And are they marked, how are they marked? With an address or some number or a phone number or?
They're marked by the numerics, and the road names are marked by their road names and colors. There's red for state routes, blue for county roads, and like a light teal for the other township roads. As well as we can hover over the address and see who the owner is of that address, and we can see what jurisdiction for fire and EMS, and it also, I believe, tells us now what electric company as well is for that jurisdiction.
Okay, and then on May 3rd, 2021, did 6344 Arbor Road appear to populate?
I believe so.
Okay. And then you also indicated the caller identified that as the actual address calling from, is that correct?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Were you able to determine the caller's identity?
Yes, she told me her name.
Okay, and who did she tell you her name was?
Audrey Branch.
Okay, and could you tell from when you received the call whether it came from a cell phone, a landline, or some other type of device?
It usually tells us on the 911 call if it's received from a landline or a mobile device. I do not remember which one it was,
Okay.
but I believe it might have been a cell phone.
Okay. Do you remember about what time you received the call?
1703.
Okay, and 1703 is in normal time. About what time?
5:03 p.m.
Okay, 5:03 p.m. Because I don't have a clock that has 17 on it. Okay.
Apologies.
So it was about 5:03. But
Yes.
in your work, you use military time.
Yes.
Okay. And so again, what was the nature of the caller? What did the caller tell you happened?
When I asked her, after getting her name, address, and phone number, I asked her what was going on. She advised that her boyfriend was hitting her in the head, so she shot him.
Okay. Did you get any other information?
I did.
What did you get?
I asked her where she shot him. She stated that she shot him in the chest. I asked him if he was still breathing. She said that she was unsure he was outside laying on the ground. And then I put her on hold for about 10 seconds to relay a little bit of information to my partner on shift with me, Dispatcher Gifford, and she got our deputies and EMT to stage by.
Okay, and so I guess that was the next question. When you put somebody on hold, you told your coworker what you had going.
Yes.
Okay. What did you do then?
I told her to do that, and then I got back on the phone and I continued getting more information from the caller.
Okay, and is that standard procedure in 911 dispatching?
Depending on the call, yes.
Okay, so it's so that I'm clear, standard procedure to let somebody else get help going, so to speak, and then you to go back on with your caller.
If our other dispatcher is not busy, they can assist us depending on the call. And depending, I mean, I can transfer her to EMT to get an ambulance, but in that specific call, we wouldn't do something like that. We would just have our partner do it if they weren't busy, so we can obtain information and stay on the line with them until emergency services got there.
Okay, and did your partner do that for you?
She did.
Okay, and do you know what resources that you requested or that you felt were necessary to be dispatched?
Our deputies and EMT was their jurisdiction.
Okay, and EMT is who?
It's one of the squads for Carroll County.
Okay, so it's an ambulance company?
Yes.
Okay. So you have to let the ambulance know where to respond?
Yes.
And that's what your partner did?
Yes.
Okay. Who let the deputies know where to respond?
My partner.
Okay, all right. And so what happened then? You got back on the line, and what happened next?
I asked her if she was still armed, and she said yes, and I asked her if she could please put the gun away, and she advised that her gun was put away and she was unarmed.
Okay. Could you tell from any of the demeanor from the caller?
She seemed, at first, when I had asked her, she had quickly said, my boyfriend was punching me in the face and I shot him, he's dead. But I couldn't quite understand her, and I was trying to make sure I was right, so I said, I'm sorry, what? And then she said, my boyfriend was hitting me in my face and I shot him. So at first it was like rushed, but then she seemed calmer.
Okay. Do you know how long you were on the call?
About 12 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. And can you tell us why you were on the call so long?
I was trying to remain on the line with her until our deputies got there.
Okay. And so it would have taken about that long before you would have gotten off the call, before someone else arrived, the deputies arrived?
Not all situations we stay on the line with the caller, but for this certain one I wanted to, for officer safety reasons and because of how the call came in.
Okay. Okay. What happened while you were on the call?
I was asking her if he was breathing, if he had a pulse. She was also advising me that her head had hurt, so I was trying to give her a little bit of pre-arrival instructions for her possible head injury that she had. She stated to me that she was bleeding, so I advised her to put a clean cloth over that and another one over that if it gets blood-soaked. She went to go check on the call, or she went to go check on her boyfriend who was outside. She stated that he was laying face down, and I kept asking if he was breathing, and she went back inside, and she advised me that her 3-year-old was in the house sleeping, and that was the only child in the home, because I had asked her if she was the only child if that was the only child in the house. She had said yes. I asked her if she was intoxicated, under the influence of anything. She said no. That they were just arguing, and he started hitting her in the head, and that's when he tried to come after her, and she shot him. She stated to me that she also had PTSD, and he had PTSD.
Those types of questions that you asked and staying on the line and asking those questions, is that part of your training? Are you supposed to do that?
On certain calls, yes, and as an officer safety reason,
Okay.
and to update EMT too.
Okay, so my next question then is, what did you do with that information as you learned it?
I basically repeated some of the things, and I let my partner know so she can relay that information to our officers.
Okay. And then at what point did you hang up with the caller?
When I knew that Deputy Licht was on scene.
Okay, and how would you know a deputy arrived at the scene?
She told me on the phone that the deputy got on scene, as well as they radio when they're on scene when they get there.
Okay, so you were able to monitor the radio traffic?
My partner was, yes, but I could also hear him in the background on the phone.
Okay, so you had 2 sources of information when a deputy arrived, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And that call, was that call recorded?
Yes,
The call from 6344?
yes,
Is that recording still maintained and on file with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department?
yes,
Okay, and how do you know that?
because I have a copy of it, but I know that because of my 911 coordinator. I know that they have to keep at least a year, but I don't know how other many years they have to keep, but I know at least we have the recordings from this year and last year.
And so did you have the occasion to make a copy?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
The hand you was been marked for purposes of identification, states Exhibit 1. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is it?
It is the copy of the 911 recording.
And is that the copy that you made?
Yes,
And what copy of 911 recording is it?
the day of the shooting.
Okay, so from 6344 Arbor Road.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, if we may.
You may.
Yep.
May 3rd, 2021, 17 hours, 3 minutes, 37 seconds.
Now, that introductory, is that part of the recording in the software, of the recording of the calls at the Sheriff's Department?
This is the only recording I have heard, so I'm not sure if that's how they specifically go, but when we listen to them in our dispatch room, they're not quite like that. So I don't know if that's something that's just kept as a record for 911 coordinator. I'm not sure.
Okay, so you have the ability, as you're sitting at your terminal, to hear a recording or play a recording, correct?
Yes, for up to 8 hours.
Okay, but do you have any control over how it records it in the system?
No.
So if it has an introductory for a date and time, that would be part of something beyond your control, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Carroll County 911, can you please fire medical?
Ready.
What's your address?
6344 Arbor Road.
And what's your name?
Audrey Branch.
And what's a good phone number for you?
409-256-8626.
And what's going on?
My boyfriend was punching me in my face and I shot him. He said,
I'm sorry, what was that?
my boyfriend was hitting me and punching me in my head and I shot him.
You shot him?
Yes, I shot
Where?
him. In his chest.
Okay, is he still breathing?
He's outside now. I haven't been out there to check on him.
Okay.
My whole head is bruised up.
Okay, hang on just 1 second for me, ma'am. Stay on the line.
All right.
What are you doing at this point?
I am speaking with my other dispatcher to get deputies and EMT to stage.
Okay, ma'am, do you still have the gun?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Where is your boyfriend at right now?
He's outside. Man is in front of the house.
Okay. Can you please put the gun away?
My gun is put up
Okay.
and I'm unarmed.
Okay. Can you tell if he's moving?
He's he was gasping for air and stuff. I don't think he's moving anymore.
And what did you shoot him with?
I shot him with my rifle.
Okay. And you said you shot him in the chest, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And you said he's outside?
Yeah, he's outside, laying outside in grass, right in front of the house.
Okay. What is his name?
Matthew Mott.
Matthew Mike?
Mott, M-O-T-T.
M-O-T-T? Okay. Can you go outside to check and see if he's still breathing?
Yeah.
Are you checking on him?
He's laying face down in the ground, so I'm trying to check.
Okay,
There's
can
blood
you
all
check to
over.
see if he has a pulse?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you check for a pulse for me or anything like that?
I'm checking.
Do you see his chest rising and falling or anything? You're advising he's
No.
laying flat down?
He's laying flat down, face down. Should I turn him over?
If you need to stop the bleed, do you think he might be breathing at all? You said you don't feel a pulse or anything?
No. My head is like really hurting right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Okay. Well, then if you don't believe that he's breathing or anything like that, I mean, just wait until paramedics get there. We also have officers en route to you. Okay.
I'm not messing with him anymore. Then he's face down in front of the house. I'll wait till he gets.
You don't feel a pulse or anything?
No, not that I can tell.
Okay.
My head is hurting
Okay.
up. So.
Well, we have units and an ambulance en route to you as well, ma'am. And what did you advise your name was again?
I'm sorry?
What did you advise your name was again?
My name?
Yes.
My name is Audrey Branch.
Ivory?
Audrey.
Audrey. Okay. Audrey.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And you advise you no longer have the gun, correct?
No, I put my gun back. And I took my magazine out.
Okay.
My baby, I still have a baby. I have my baby here asleep inside, and she's still asleep.
You have a daughter in the house?
Yes, ma'am.
How old is your daughter?
She's 3.
She's 3? Is that the only
Yes.
child in the home?
Yes, right now, she's the only one here.
Okay.
Right now.
Are you intoxicated or anything, or under the influence of anything?
No, because we were arguing before, and then he just attacked me in my head and stuff. So my rifle ran to the bed, and I grabbed it because he was coming after me, and I shot him. I shot his chest.
Okay. And this just happened?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So he was hitting you and that's when you did it? Okay. Where is the gun located at?
It's under my bed.
It's under your bed?
Yep, that's marked.
Okay, but it's unloaded?
Yep.
Okay. Are you able to meet the officers outside?
Yes, ma'am. Are they here?
They should be pretty close.
I had to call before, like a month ago, for somebody to come out here. So,
For a domestic situation?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. What are your injuries? What on your head? Are you bleeding from anywhere or anything like that?
My forehead.
Your forehead?
Bleeding. Let me see. I have, busted lip. I have knots all around my face, but he's punching in my face.
Okay. But you're not, are you bleeding from anywhere in your head or anything like that?
Let me see. I don't know. I haven't done anything to it, but it looks like, it's just pulling up blood, so he probably cut it.
Okay, do you have a clean cloth or something that you can put on your head?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can try to put a clean cloth or something like that on your head. That way to try to stop the bleeding there. And don't remove the cloth if it gets blood soaked. Put another one on top of it.
Okay.
Try to slow down the bleeding there on your head, okay?
Yes, ma'am. I have, he has PTSD.
He has,
I have, I've been diagnosed with adjustment disorder. Previously, it's just, PTSD.
okay.
We're both better. I show the cops whenever they get here, but there's a hole in the wall where he knocked my head into the wall, and that's when he started punching me. And then from there, I just got my rifle into the bed and got up, and he was coming back towards me, and I shot him.
Okay. Well, our unit should be there very shortly.
I hear sirens.
Do you? Okay. And we'll have the ambulance get you checked out too.
Okay.
Are you outside?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to take him again. I didn't. I think he's gone.
Okay. Do you see our units anywhere or hear any sirens?
I hear sirens up the road.
Okay.
Yeah, he's starting to get discoloration in that space. Turn loose.
Okay. You don't want to do CPR or anything?
I can try to turn him over if you try.
Did you turn him over?
I'm trying.
And you're for sure he doesn't have a pulse? Do you have anything to try to stop the bleeding? Where's he
No, his, ex, let me see. It's not really, let me see. I don't feel a pulse.
Okay, and he's not breathing or anything. Did you want to do CPR? Do you know how to do CPR?
Yeah, I vaguely remember, but he's not, there's no movement, rise and fall of the chest.
You don't have to. You don't have to do CPR if you don't want to, but if you want to, I can walk you through it.
Okay, yeah, I'll try.
Okay. Okay, listen carefully. I'm going to tell you what to do. Make sure he's flat on his back on a hard surface, okay? Kneel by his side. Put the heel of your hand on the center of their chest, right in between the nipples. And put your other hand on top of that hand. Push down hard and fast, at least 2 inches in depth, allowing the chest to return to its normal position between each pump. And try to pump twice every second, at least 100 to 120 compressions per minute.
Sheriff just pulled up. I'm gonna try it.
Okay, the sheriffs are out there with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's gone. He's gone. The sheriff is here now.
Okay, are you okay to disconnect with me?
What are you? Nothing. Okay.
May 3rd, 2021, 17 hours, 16 minutes, 1 second.
Okay, Dispatcher Day, having heard that recording, does that recording truly and accurately reflect the call that you answered on May 3rd, 2021?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and any indication that that call had been modified or changed in any way from when you were on the call as it happened?
No.
Okay. The content of that recording is what was received into the dispatch center?
Yes.
Okay. And I have no other questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. A, you can step down. Thank you. Okay, well, are you anticipating meeting Ms. Day further today?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you are dismissed for the day then. Thank you.
She has an
Oh, yeah, Britt, leave the exhibit here. I'm sorry, I didn't even see you had it. Ms. Day. We need that. Let's go ahead and hand it back to Steve. If that's our copy. Okay, State of Ohio, your next witness.
statement called Deputy Erik Licht.
You like, go ahead and raise your right hand.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Deputy, for the record, would you tell us your name and address of your employer, please?
It's Deputy Erik Licht, and it's Carroll County Sheriff's Office, and we're at 43 2nd Street Southeast here in Carroll.
Okay, and you're employed at the Sheriff's Department, correct?
I am, sir, yes.
What do you do at the Sheriff's Department?
Currently assigned to the Patrol Division, so go out, patrol the county, answer all calls for service, investigate crimes.
How long have you been a deputy sheriff?
I was sworn in February of 2010, so it'll be coming up on 12 years now.
Okay. And have you always worked at the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, or have you worked other places?
Just with the Sheriff's Office here.
Okay. And are you certified in the state of Ohio in the field of law enforcement?
Yes, sir, I am.
Would you briefly tell the members of the jury how you obtained that certification and what you had to do to be a certified peace officer?
Went through the 6-month training academy, passed basic training, and then took the state certification test. At the end, passed that test, and then every year we're required to complete so many hours of continual professional training.
Okay. And is that certification in good standing?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Do you have any other specialized training in law enforcement that you've received as part of being a deputy sheriff?
I did go through, it's been a couple of years now, but the sheriff did put me through a crisis intervention training out at Tufts County. Also went through some corrections academy. Last year went through a program to get my small pilot certificate for our county drone that we fly occasionally. And then outside of just regular yearly training. Yes.
With your, strike that, what shift do you customarily work?
Right now I'm on the 7 a to 3 p.m. shift, so day shift.
Okay. And prior to working as a road deputy, did you work in another department of the sheriff's department, or have you always been a road deputy?
No, when I was first sworn in, I was part-time in the jail, so I was part-time corrections.
Okay. And then when you, how did you go to be a road deputy full-time then?
Saw that there was a position open and I applied for it.
Okay. So how long have you been a road deputy?
I started, I want to say maybe February timeframe, 2015. It was the end of 2014 is when I got hired on full-time, and then I was in the jail maybe 6-7 months before I made it to the road full-time.
Okay, so you haven't always worked the road?
No, sir.
Okay, but you've worked most of the road most of your career?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, were you working as a deputy sheriff on May 3rd, 2021?
I was, yes.
And what shift were you working on that day?
That day I was the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift.
Okay, and were you working alone or with a partner?
Deputy James Martin was also out with me.
Okay, when you say out with you?
He was in another cruiser.
Okay, that was my question.
Yes,
are you in the same car, or are you single car units?
It's single man car units, yes.
Okay, okay. Did you have the occasion to respond to 6344 Arbor Road, Mechanicstown?
I did, yes.
And tell us how you received notification to respond to that address.
I got a radio call from dispatch saying that there had been a shooting at that residence, and that the female caller called in advising she had shot the male that had lived there, and I was dispatched to that.
Okay, and so it comes over the airways to your car, to your radio?
Yes, sir. The dispatch puts it out over the radio, and then our mobile data terminals, our MDTs, we also get a little narration over our computer as to the call notes or whatever that pops up.
Okay. Where were you when you got the radio dispatch?
In the Carroll area.
Okay, so you were on patrol?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so when you received that call, what did you do?
Responded, activated my lights and sirens and responded immediately, got there about as fast as I could.
Okay, and would that be standard procedure with a call like that to activate your sirens and your lights?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay, and about how long did it take you to get from where you were to the Arbor Road address?
I want to say myself, it was about roughly 9 minutes from Carroll.
Okay, and generally, what direction did you go, or what routes did you take to get there, if you can recall?
I remember it being a Mechanicstown address, so I believe I hopped on State Route 39, Salineville, and headed out towards Mechanicstown, and then started heading north from Mechanicstown.
Okay, and sorry if I asked you this, but do you recall about how long it took you to get there?
I'd say roughly about 9 minutes.
Okay.
Give or take.
Okay. That address, what did you find at 6344 Arbor Road when you arrived?
Oh, when I first pulled in into the driveway in the front yard off the house, I observed the female. She was currently kneeling over the male that was laying on his back in the yard, and he was laying on his back. I pulled in. She had got up, and then she'd come over to the driveway and stated that he was gone. He's gone. I think she was still on the phone with dispatch at the time. And the sheriff's out here now. Went up, saw him laying in the yard, and asked her to have a seat. She ended up walking back towards the house, but then my focus, I was keeping an eye on the female half when I first arrived, and then primarily all my focus was on him in the front yard.
Okay. Was there anybody else at the scene when you arrived other than yourself and what you saw?
No, sir.
Okay. And what did you first do then after you did that? Were you able to identify the female that you saw?
Yes, sir, I can.
Did you identify her at that time to know who it was?
Yes, I was familiar with both the male and the female half.
Okay. Do you see the female in the courtroom today that you saw when you arrived at 6344 Arbor Road?
I do, sir, yes.
And would you point her out, please?
She's sitting.
Reflect that the deputy pointed at the defendant.
Okay. The 6344 Arbor Road Northeast Mechanicstown address, is that located in the county of Carroll, state of Ohio?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And so what did you do then?
Oh, I saw him down in the front yard. Noticed that he was injured. Considerable amount of blood on his person.
Okay,
put personal protective gear on.
Okay, when you say him, were you able to identify male or female?
It was male. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so was it obvious?
Yes, sir.
Okay, dumb question, but necessary question.
No, yes, sir.
Okay. And so you, what did you observe about that person lying there?
He was on his back. He had his right arm was stretched out towards the walkway. He was wearing tennis shoes, shorts. He had a black T-shirt on. Currently, when I got there, the black T-shirt was up towards his shoulders. His eyes were closed. He was already starting to turn a yellowish, bluish color. I couldn't see if he was breathing. I did notice a clean-cut hole in about this area of his chest. And so I'd say the upper right-hand corner of his left side of his chest.
Your Honor, if you let the record reflect, the witness is pointing to that part of his uniform.
You say that part.
The upper right, upper left?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It is noted.
Okay. About?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what did you do then?
After I had my gloves on, I attempted to check for a pulse in his neck.
Okay. Why did you put your gloves on?
Because of the amount of blood everywhere. We're just trained at one, crime scene, and then two, possible bloodborne pathogens, just to glove up before first aid.
Okay, so what did you do then? What after you gloved up?
Checked him for a pulse, didn't feel a pulse. I do remember telling dispatch to go ahead and send the ambulance in. They had an ambulance staged nearby. Normally, we get there first, make sure the scene's safe before medics come in. So I went ahead and said, okay, the male is down in the front yard. Go ahead and send the ambulance EMT crew in. Checked him for a pulse, couldn't find one. I just started doing chest compressions on him. And I told dispatch, hey, let EMTs know he's out here in the front yard. I'm starting chest compressions on him.
Okay, and is that standard procedure?
I would like to say, I wouldn't say it's standard, but normally you get there and you see somebody, you treat the injuries, what have you, best of your ability, secure the scene until somebody shows up.
So you decided to do CPR on your own?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at that point in time, when you started CPR, where was the defendant?
She had walked back towards the front of the house, and I would say the front door, I'm a rough guess, maybe about 30, 40 feet off to my left. And I'm not sure if she went back in the house, but she did come back out, and she was standing over in front of the front door. And at that time, I had asked her what happened. I hadn't moved. I was still standing next to him. Asked her what happened, and then at that time she told me she briefly told me what had happened.
Okay, what'd she tell you?
I asked her what had happened. She said that her and the male had gotten into an argument. He had punched her in her face, so she went and grabbed her rifle. He came back at her, so she shot him.
Okay, and when you learned that information, what, if anything, did you do?
I just said okay and kept working on him.
Okay, and what was the defendant doing at that time?
She was, best of my knowledge, she was still standing over in front of the front door while I was working on him.
Okay, did you observe in the time, from the time you got there and the time that you started CPR, did you observe any injuries on the defendant?
I didn't really, when I first got there, she had gotten up under her own power. She did have some blood on her hands. I'm assuming it was from him because she was kneeling next to him, and I didn't see any visible injuries, but again, I didn't specifically pull her aside and here, let me look you over. Like I said, most of my focus was on him, and she did not say, hey, I'm injured, call for an ambulance for me.
Okay, so there was, okay, so there wasn't anything obvious to you that would divert your attention from the male on the ground to the defendant?
No, sir.
Okay, so was the defendant bleeding profusely?
I wouldn't, it looked like he had been. By the time that I arrived, most of the blood had already coagulated on the ground, so he wasn't, it didn't look like any fresh blood was coming from him.
What about the defendant? Was the defendant bleeding profusely that you observed?
No, sir, she was not.
Okay, was she capable of talking?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So about how long were you doing CPR before you were relieved?
Let's see. Deputy Martin arrived on scene. I forget exactly what time. I did have him bring a first aid kit over and one of the bag valve masks. I didn't have any in the cruiser I was in at the time, so I wasn't able to give the male rescue breaths. I was just doing the chest compressions. And then it was shortly after that time, after Deputy Martin had secured the defendant, he jumped in and we started switching out with chest compressions.
Okay, so about how long were you there after Deputy Martin, till Deputy Martin arrived?
I want to say maybe, let's see, I was 16. We got there 3-4 minutes. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. And is Deputy Martin still at the Sheriff's Department?
No, sir, he is not.
Why is that?
He recently deceased.
Okay, he passed away?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you and Deputy Martin then performed first aid?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and while you were performing first aid, were you able to observe what the defendant was doing or where the defendant was?
He actually, I had requested that she come over and just stay nearby. I told her, I said, I understand your daughter's in the house, but because of the circumstances, could you just please stand out here with us so we can keep an eye on you while we're working on the mail here?
Why would you want to do that? Why would you make that request?
Just due to the circumstances, I didn't want her going back into the house and possibly retrieving a firearm or whatever, or running off, just for our safety and then the medics for their safety when they came back in.
Okay, did the defendant comply?
She did, yeah. Deputy Martin advised that he was just detaining her, that she was not under arrest at that time. He said, just due to the nature of this call, I'm just placing handcuffs on you. And then we did have her have a seat over right on the edge of the front porch nearby. And then she had stayed there until the EMT ambulance had arrived. And they came over, tended to her, and then the one medic was assisting me with the male half.
Okay. About how long after Deputy Martin arrived and when you were doing first aid and all that, did the ambulance arrive? If you know.
Roughly maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. when they arrived, was there one ambulance, two ambulances, 10 ambulances?
There's one ambulance.
Okay, and what did they do? What did you observe them do when they arrived?
The one medic came over to me. I told him I already started on the male half. Guys, I couldn't find the pulse. The rescue breaths didn't appear to be going where they should, down into his lungs. And then the other medic went over and asked Deputy Martin if that was the other party. And the one medic tended to her, asked her if she had any injuries, and then the one medic that was helping me hooked the male half up to I believe it's called an EKG, to check for his pulse and whatnot.
Okay. Did you summons any other assistance to the scene?
Me, no, sir. No, Major Graham had also heard the radio traffic, and he was on his way also.
Okay, so other deputies were responding, but you didn't request any?
No, sir.
Okay, so after EMS arrived, and did they take over working?
The one medic did check the male half, advised it, and they couldn't find a pulse, so he went ahead and said he's probably deceased. So I told Deputy Martin it's probably going to be a dead on arrival or a code 16, and then it was advised dispatch, okay, it's a dead on arrival, and then that's when we had to county coroner notify.
Okay, is a code 16 the same as meaning dead on arrival?
Yes, sir. It's just code for DOA call.
And is that code that's used in your law enforcement duties?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and why do we use codes and signals to talk?
It's just easier. It's less traffic on the radio. It's easier, more clearly understood than saying it's less likely to be misunderstood.
Fair enough. When you make that radio broadcast that there's a code 16, where does that go, or who are you alerting?
Well, it was dispatching, but then anybody that's on our radio channel would hear it. So any responding units would hear it also.
Okay. So was there any other deputies that responded?
Major Graham did arrive, and then Sheriff Williams was out sometime later. I'm not really sure of exactly the time frame, but deputy-wise, it was myself, Major Graham, and then Deputy Martin.
Okay. And because there was a code 16, was the coroner alerted?
Yes, sir, he was.
And did you do that?
I had Deputy Martin call over the radio. It was, hey, would you like me to call for him, or do you want to call for him? Nah, it doesn't matter. And then James just went ahead and made it over the radio.
And is it standard operating procedure in your world to request the coroner when you have somebody that's deceased like this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so at that point, did Major Graham arrive?
I don't know exactly what time, but after he was, the EMTs had already checked the male half, and he was found to be deceased. Major Graham arrived after that.
Okay. And so after the radio call went out that the male was deceased, was there any further attempts at life-saving?
No, sir.
Okay. So at that point, what did you do, or what were your responsibilities while you were at the scene?
I went over, I told Major Graham what had happened when I first arrived, and then normally we're trained to, when we're responding to a crime scene, just keep the scene safe so it's not tampered with, and then just start taking pictures to document any evidence. So I went to grab the camera out of the car, started snapping a couple pictures, and then that's Deputy Martin had went into the house to stay with the defendant's daughter, and I was just standing next to the deceased until Major Graham reassigned me and said, okay, here's your sign-in sheet, start keeping track of who else responds. Okay,
so you have a sign-in sheet at a scene like that?
Yes, sir.
What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, documentation of who's there, who arrives, at what time, just so for record keeping.
Okay, and is that standard procedure
Yes,
in your world?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so as part of any investigation further into the circumstances, did you have any involvement in that?
No, sir, I did not.
And is that what a road deputy is expected to do, is to do investigations, or just?
To a certain degree, until you're relieved. When Major Graham came, he had requested that dispatch go ahead and contact the Ohio BCI&I, Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and have them send investigators out.
Okay, and would that have been by radio?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you would have heard that
Yes.
on your radio? All the radios are interlinked with
Yes,
each
sir.
other? Okay. Okay. Going to ask you to think back to the person on the ground that you rendered aid to. When you arrived and while you were rendering first aid, at any point in time, did you see any weapons that were found on or near that person?
I did not know, sir.
Were there any firearms, knives, baseball bats, any weapon of any kind?
No, sir.
Okay. Were there any, did the defendant make any request of you to call an ambulance?
She did not know.
Okay. Did the defendant appear to you to have any gunshot wounds?
No, sir.
Okay. Did she appear to you to have any broken bones?
No, sir.
Okay. Did she appear to be dazed or confused?
No, sir.
Okay. While you were talking with her and while she was outside, did she lose consciousness?
No, sir.
Okay. Was the defendant capable of communicating with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At some point in time, did the defendant leave the scene?
But when the first medic was tending to her, he had told Deputy Martin, hey, if it's okay with you, can we take her over to the ambulance so we can examine her? And then the medic did escort her over to the back of the ambulance where she was initially treated. And then Deputy Martin just advised them, hey, if you need me to take the handcuffs off of her, I can. She hasn't been patted down yet, so we'll just leave those on her. And then after that, I believe she was transported to the hospital.
Okay. But were you involved in any of those decisions?
No,
or
sir.
make any requests?
I was next to the male half pretty much the entire time.
Okay. Did the defendant ask you to give her any first aid?
No, sir.
Okay. And did you give any first aid to her?
No, sir.
Okay. I have no other questions, Joe. Thank you.
Deputy, when you were dispatched, you were aware that my client had called 911?
I was told that there was a shooting complaint, and it may have went over the radio that she had called 911, but to be honest, as soon as I heard shooting complaint mailed down on the front yard, my mind just kind of...
And you were aware when you were dispatched that my client claimed to be attacked by someone?
Again, it may have went over the radio, but I was focused on address shooting complaint. I had later came across that when I opened my MDT and stated it. Yeah, she had been punched in the face.
And when you showed up, my client was kneeling by Matt?
She was kneeling next to him in the yard, yes, ma'am.
And she was unarmed?
She was unarmed, yes. The only thing she had on her at the time was the cell phone, and then when I had gotten out of the car, I had asked her, hey, do you have anything on you, and meaning weapons, and she stated she did not.
And she was treated by the medics for her injuries?
Yes, when they arrived, the first medic did check her over and then took her over to the ambulance.
And she went to the hospital for her injuries?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you're trained, I'm sure, on how to respond to domestic violence situations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There's actually statutes that, regulations and
Yes,
internal protocols for handling domestic violence situations, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you are trained that domestic violence is serious
Yes, ma'am.
and that you're to take it serious.
Yes, ma'am.
And not only is it a serious thing for the person being attacked, but when you show up, you have concerns for officer safety as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're trained that someone trying to leave their abuser, that's the most dangerous time for them?
Objection beyond the scope of direct.
I'll allow it.
I guess it varies by circumstance.
And you carry a gun when you go to a crime scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's to protect others?
Yes, ma'am.
It's also to protect yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're attacked by an assailant and seriously harmed and unable to control him, you can protect yourself.
Objection. Brown.
I'll allow it.
If somebody attacks me or is attacking somebody else, and I believe myself or that other person's death or serious bodily injury, yes, I am authorized to use force to stop that threat.
And the proximity of the assailant matters to you in determining whether you need to draw your weapon.
Yes, ma'am.
And this actually stems from the idea that an assailant, by the time you determine that they're going to attack you, draw your weapon and fire a round, they can actually close a distance, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's actually called the 21-foot rule.
Yes, ma'am, or the Tula rule, yes, ma'am.
You're trained that injuries in domestic violence cases can be serious.
Yes, ma'am.
You're trained that strangulation is serious.
Yes, ma'am.
It causes serious physical harm to the person being strangled.
Yes, ma'am.
And strangulation is when the colloquial way people often say is someone putting their hands on their neck, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Strangulation can cut off oxygen to somebody's brain.
Yes, ma'am.
It can cause damage internally.
Yes, ma'am.
It can cause damage externally, too.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Someone's head being bashed into the wall, that's also serious.
I would say yes, ma'am.
That can cause a concussion.
Possible, yes, ma'am.
Objection.
You may approach. Okay, so at this point, I'll sustain that objection, and I'll go ahead and ask.
Having your head bashed into the wall can cause serious injuries,
It's possible that it can, yes, ma'am.
internal and external.
Yes, ma'am.
Bruising that lasts for a couple weeks, pretty serious bruising.
Yes, ma'am, I would agree.
Being punched repeatedly in the face by a man, that is serious too.
Yes, ma'am.
It can cause both serious external injuries and potentially internal ones.
Yes, ma'am.
If a man hits a woman once, they can hit her again, right?
No, ma'am.
They hit her once, they can't hit her again?
Again, it depends on the circumstances. Why would he be striking her to begin with?
You've dealt with repeat offenders?
I have, yes.
In your training as for officer safety, if you know that an assailant beat up another officer, there's a chance they could beat up you too.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last
For
part.
officer safety, if you're aware that someone beat up another officer before, that can cause concern for you that they could beat you up too.
Oh, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
You saw the decedent when you showed up?
Mr. Mott?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to take a look at my client. Is Matthew Mott bigger than my client?
Yes, he is.
Is Matthew Mott a man?
Yes, he is.
Is my client a woman?
Yes, ma'am.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
I have no questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Deputy Licht, thank you. You may step down. State of Ohio, at this point today, do you anticipate recalling Deputy Licht?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then you are excused for the day. Thank you.
Sir?
Okay, here's what I want to do at this point. Before we get to another witness, I do want to take a brief break, long enough for everybody to go out, get a little refreshed, come back in and be ready to go. So 2:25, we'll be back in and ready to go. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that was from our air conditioning issues, or heater issues, so at least I hope, because it sounded like somebody fell. So we're going to take a recess until 2:25. We'll be back in. So jury, you are released right now. You can be seated. Okay, we are back on the record on 21 CR 6643. It is still the state of Ohio's case, so Prosecutor Barnett, call your next witness. Need some water?
No, I'm good, thank you.
You're okay? Okay.
I think I'm good.
Okay. If you need some water, let us know.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
He can.
Major Graham, you can take the mask off as you testify. Go ahead, Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. For the record, sir, would you tell us the name and address of your employer, please?
Major Calvin Graham, Carroll County Sheriff's Office, 43 2nd Street, Southeast Carroll, Ohio.
And by whom are you employed?
Carroll County Sheriff.
And what do you do?
I'm a detective, investigate cases,
Okay. How long have you been at the sheriff's department?
27 years.
Okay. Have you worked at any other sheriff's departments?
No.
What are you, you said you investigate cases. Have you received any training experience in investigations?
I have had Reed course and also Southern Police Institute homicide investigation course.
Okay. And so, are you certified in the state of Ohio as a law enforcement officer?
Yes.
And you received the requisite training to obtain that certification?
Yes.
Do you receive the requisite continuing training to maintain that certification?
Yes, maintain continued professional education.
Okay, and you indicated you've had some, well, is your current certification in good standing with the state of Ohio?
Yes.
Okay, and you indicated that you've had specialized trainings in specialized school. Would you elaborate further what those trainings were and whether you received a certification or?
1998, I had a course at out in for metallurgical death investigator course in St. Louis, Missouri. The Reed course I had down in I believe Montgomery County or Greene County, one of the two, for the Reed interview and interrogation course. And the second course, or the other course I had in death investigation was a homicide school at Louisville, Kentucky. That was in, I'm not sure what year exactly, 3 or 4 years ago.
A little closer to the microphone.
Sure.
So when you mentioned the Reed investigation, what is that?
That's interviewing techniques to find deception, and also how to interview people and tell whether they're deceiving you or whether they're truthful.
Okay, and is that a common training that investigators take in your field?
Yes.
Okay, and were you able to, did you have to take a test and receive a certificate?
No, it was a 2-day course, and there was no test in the course. Just it's more of a seminar type course for that.
Okay, so is it a requirement to be able to investigate cases?
No.
Okay, so it's something that you did to help you, in other words?
That's correct.
Okay. With regards to the other courses, same thing. Are they required?
No, they're not.
Okay. Did you obtain certifications or certificates? Take a test to complete those?
Returned. There was test out at St. Louis. That was at that point in time. I was helping the county coroner do investigations under Dr. Bissell, and there was a test at the end of that course.
Okay. With regards to how long have you investigated cases? Have you done that for all your years at the Sheriff's Department? or
No,
just-
I worked road patrol, and starting out, I worked dispatch, I worked the jail. So I've worked pretty much about all the jobs at the sheriff's office from start to now.
Okay. And how long have you investigated cases?
I investigated cases like from 1995 to around 2000. Then I went back to road patrol, and then I come back to investigations, I believe, in 2011.
Can you give us examples of what types of cases you've investigated over the course of that time frame?
Everything, pretty much generally, we see a lot of like burglary cases. We see some death cases, traffic crashes, and we don't see a lot of homicide here or murder, so, but I have investigated those.
Okay. And when you say you've investigated them, have you been a primary investigator or assisting others, or both?
Both.
Okay. Okay. Were you working for the Carroll County Sheriff's Department on May 3rd, 2021?
I was off, and the sheriff notified me at home. We had a reported shooting incident, and I responded from my home. I was off duty, but was called back out.
Okay. And so is that common in your employment with the Sheriff's Department to be off duty and have to come on duty?
Yes.
Okay. And so you were alerted by someone else of an incident, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know where the incident was or where you were told to respond to?
I was responded to Mechanicstown to Apollo Road address that dispatch had given me. I don't recall the numerics of it, but from years working the county, I knew where I needed to be.
Okay. So you indicated it was Apollo Road?
I believe that's where it was.
Okay. And so you're familiar with the county, and so you didn't need directions?
No.
Okay. So, and you don't remember the numerics of where you went?
No.
Okay. But where were you when you received the call? You were at home?
I was at home.
Okay. And did you respond right away, or did it take you some amount of time?
No, I responded right away. I got back in uniform. I hadn't been home that long. And I was called at 5:08 by the sheriff, and probably within 10 minutes I was back out and headed that way.
Okay. And so you responded to the location where you were told to go?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you remember about how long it took you to get there?
I'd say probably 20 minutes roughly. Is what I'm guessing.
Okay. And so you were from home, so you don't live near Fox Township?
No, I live over on the western part of the county.
Okay.
Southwestern part.
Did you respond lights and siren?
I did.
Okay. And so when you arrived at the address, I guess, first of all, is that address located in Carroll County?
Yes.
What did you observe when you got there?
When I arrived, Deputy Licht was on scene, and Deputy Martin. And there was somebody lying in the yard with a white sheet over him, and the EMS was on scene.
Okay. And was there anybody else on scene?
No, not at that time.
Okay. And so what did you do first when you got there?
I got there, I talked to Deputy Licht and Deputy Martin, learned that Audrey Branch was in the back of the ambulance, and so I looked at the body, and at that point in time I went over to check on Audrey.
Okay. Tell us about looking at the body. Why did you do that?
They had attempted to do some resuscitation, and Deputy Licht did, and Deputy Martin, just for my own curiosity, before I went and talked to her to see what maybe transpired. Dispatch had told me that they'd received a call of a domestic and that she'd shot. And he was laying outside.
Okay, and was there a body outside?
There was.
Did it appear to be male or female?
Male.
Okay, and was it consistent with what you learned in the radio broadcast or what you learned before you arrived?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see anything else remarkable around the body when you were there?
No, I didn't, because I did not move the body or disturb the body at that point in time. There was no need to.
Is that standard, not to remove a body if you don't have to?
Not until the coroners arrived.
Okay. Was the coroner contacted?
He was.
Did you contact the coroner or did somebody else?
No, I believe dispatch did.
And is that part of protocol?
That's our protocol.
Okay. And so, did you learn who was laying on the ground?
From Deputy Licht, and then that was Matthew Mott.
Okay. And then did you learn who else was involved?
Audrey Branch.
Okay. And is Audrey Branch in court today?
Yes.
Would you point her out, please?
She's sitting over here.
Let the record reflect that Major Graham pointed at the defendant.
When you were at the body, did you observe any firearms around the body?
No.
Did you observe any type of instrument, device, baseball bat, anything that could be used as a weapon?
No.
Was there anything laying around the body?
No.
After you observed the body, what did you do next?
I believe I went over, if I recall, I went to the back of the ambulance to check on Audrey, and I noticed that she was in handcuffs, so I removed her handcuffs so they could treat her. And I believe somebody was holding the phone up to her so she could talk to someone. I believe it may have been her mother, but I'm not positive.
Okay. So, did you observe any injuries, or what was being treated, if anything?
She had a little bit of blood on her forehead and had a little bit of a cut that I noticed. It's what stands out to me. Other than that, I didn't see a whole lot of injury.
Okay. At that time, did you say anything to her?
I don't recall saying anything really to her or asking her any questions at that point in time. I let medical treat her and do what needed to be done.
Okay. Did she ask anything of you?
No.
Okay. And what did you observe the medics doing, if anything?
At that point in time, they really wasn't doing a whole lot. We're trying to figure out whether she wanted to go to the hospital to get treated or what. And then at some point in time, she decided to go to the hospital.
Okay. Did she voice that to you or somebody else?
She voiced it to the squad personnel.
Okay. And were you present when she voiced it?
I was back and forth between the sheriff and the squad because at one point in time she was going to go by ambulance and then she wasn't going. And then I believe I was back over talking to the sheriff whenever they said that she wanted to be transported.
Okay. And so what did you do next then, when you found that out?
So I made arrangements. Once they were ready to leave, I was going to follow the ambulance to the hospital and be with her so that I could see what injuries she had. And whenever she was finished at the hospital, come back to the sheriff's office for an interview.
Okay. Is that common practice for an officer to go to a hospital if someone is going to a hospital from a scene like that?
Yes.
Okay. About how long were you on the scene before that went down that the ambulance decided to leave?
I'm just guessing maybe half hour, 45 minutes, maybe close to an hour.
Okay. Did you go in the ambulance?
No, I followed behind in the sheriff car.
Okay. In the interim, before the ambulance departed with the defendant, did you do anything else in the course of your investigation at the scene?
Deputy Stauffer showed up, or Investigator Stauffer showed up, and I spoke to you, and I spoke to the sheriff. I made some phone calls to BCI and talked to the agent that was responding.
Okay. What's BCI?
It's the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, the state of Ohio, that they have all the technology and all the crime scene forensic equipment that we don't have as a small agency. So they gather the evidence.
Okay. And is it customary in any criminal case to involve BCI for collection of evidence or to assist in the collection of evidence?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Would it be common in a case like this to request BCI to assist in collection of evidence?
Yes,
Okay. Are you trained in crime scene collection of evidence?
I am, but we don't have the stuff to collect it, and it has to go to the BCI lab anyways.
Okay. That was the next question. Do you have the facilities to make analysis?
No,
Okay. So does BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, do they have the facilities to do laboratory analysis if it's needed?
yes, they do.
Okay. At that point in time, at that moment when you made that call, did you have any idea of what specifically you were going to need in terms of collection of evidence?
Told them what we had and what the scenario was. It also was appearing that we were going to have a rainstorm. So then the agent called back and wanted to know if we would set a tent up or cover the body so that when they arrived that, you know, they would have it dry, seeing the work.
And how does, you make a phone call to BCI, but is there a certain person or who responds?
I talked to Investigator Hoopman from BCI. He was on call that they're dispatched. He was fairly close to Carroll County, so he'd reached out to me, and then we had phone conversation back and forth on what he would like for us to do before he arrived.
Okay, so a BCI investigator is not on staff at the Sheriff's Department?
No.
Okay. It would be somebody like you that has to respond perhaps from some other location and take some time to get there?
That's correct.
Okay, and so, were you given an approximation of an ETA or a time of arrival when a BCI official would be there?
No, he was coming from the New Philadelphia area, and then I'm not sure where the other agent was coming from. So it would take them an hour or a little more to get to that location.
Okay, and so were you present when BCI arrived?
No, I wasn't. I was en route to the hospital.
Okay, so you left the scene?
Yes.
Okay, and I believe your testimony was you followed the ambulance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and where did you go?
We went to Mercy Hospital in Canton.
Okay, and did the ambulance respond lights and siren?
No.
Did you respond lights and siren?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And so what happened when you arrived at Mercy Hospital? What did you observe?
We got to the emergency room, and they went in, took Audrey back to her room. I was glad to go back to the room, and they did some triage and assessment. Then whenever she was treated, I stepped out of the room.
Okay. About how long were you there?
2-3 hours.
Okay. Were they treating Audrey Branch that full 2 hours?
They were doing several things. They were doing some forensic assessments that was done by a specialized nurse for victims.
Okay. Were you present for that, or was that one of the procedures?
I was standing outside. I wasn't permitted to be in the room.
Okay. When they first brought Audrey Branch in, was there emergency trauma team waiting for her?
No.
Where did they take her into?
They took her back to back to a room in the ER at Mercy.
Okay. To your appearance, to what you observed, was there any trauma that required an emergency procedure at that point when you arrived?
No, there wasn't.
Okay. When you entered, did you have the occasion then to view any her physical appearance or any injuries that we were made aware of?
I observed some bruising toward the end of it on the back side of her, I believe it was her left arm, and she had a mark on her head with a little bit of blood and a superficial wound.
Okay. Appear to have any broken bones?
No.
appear to be in pain or agony?
I think she was complaining of a headache, and if I recall right.
How would you describe her demeanor when you were first there?
She was quiet. She talked, but she was quiet.
Okay. Appear to be disoriented?
No,
Did she lose consciousness at any time when you were there?
she didn't in my presence. She never lost any consciousness.
Okay. Was she hooked up to any machines while you were there?
I don't believe so.
Okay. At your time at the scene, before you arrived at the hospital, did any of those types of things happen? Were there any machines hooked up? Were there any IVs?
I never seen no IVs or, no EKGs or anything like that back of the ambulance, but
Okay.
She had been in there prior to my arrival too.
Sure. Did the defendant, while you were there, were you made aware of any testing that she was given? So in other words, did a doctor order up any tests or any x-rays or things like that?
Honestly, I don't recall whether they did any x-rays or not. I know she had a forensic nurse that was in there. I'm not sure what all they collected and what they've done at that point in time.
Sure, okay. You said you were there about 2 hours?
2 to 3 hours, roughly.
Okay. Was a doctor or a nurse with her the whole time during that 2 hours?
No. There was a period of time where it was her and I standing in the, I was standing in the room while she was lying on her bed, but that might have been 45 minutes to an hour that time.
Okay. So did you have to hurry up and wait, basically at everybody else's mercy at the hospital?
Pretty much.
Okay. During the time that you were with her, again, did you notice any other injuries other than what you alluded to at the scene?
No, I never seen any others, but she was still clothed.
Okay. Were you made aware of any broken bones or bleeding or concussions or breathing difficulties?
No.
Did you notice if the defendant was missing any teeth?
No.
Okay. Did she appear to be alert?
She did.
Okay. Did she cooperate with the hospital staff?
She did.
Okay. And was she admitted to the hospital?
No, she was not.
Okay. So what precipitated or what happened when there was, or I guess the first question is, was she discharged?
Once she was discharged, then I transported her back to the sheriff's office, and at that point in time, myself and investigator Stauffer, we went to our interview room, and she was advised of her Miranda rights and asked to give a statement of what occurred.
Sure. During the trip back from Mercy Hospital to Carrollton, about how long did it take?
Half hour, 45 minutes.
Okay. Common driving time from Canton to Carrollton?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you talk in the vehicle about anything?
We talked, but I instructed her that while in the vehicle, it would just be normal talk, that I would not question her in the vehicle. I did have a body camera, and I did have it activated, so it was just normal day-to-day talk, and it wasn't a lot of talking.
Okay, so it wasn't about the investigation
No.
or the case or anything about details?
No.
Generic conversation?
Yes.
How's the weather or something along those lines?
That's correct.
Okay. So you arrived at the sheriff's department, and there was another deputy with you that came to an interview room?
To the interview room was investigator Stauffer, who is also, he's commissioned through the sheriff's office, but he investigates cases and follows up for the prosecutor and children's services stuff.
Okay. But he is a deputy sheriff?
That's correct.
Okay. And so he assisted in your investigation and assisted in this
That's
case?
correct.
Is that correct? Okay. And so you indicated that the purpose to bring Audrey Branch back to the sheriff's department was for an interview, correct?
That's correct. The first priority was to take her to the hospital where she wanted to go and see if she had any injuries or to get her treated if she needed treatment and document those. So the purpose for the interview was to see what happened rather than from when she called in and told us what happened on the phone and requested the squad.
And is that a common practice or proper procedure to attempt to interview someone about what happened?
Yes.
Even if they're a suspect?
Yes.
Okay, and was she a suspect in the shooting?
She admitted when she called in, so I wanted to see what her story was.
Sure. And so prior to having conversations or you indicated that she was Mirandized, correct?
Yes.
And what does being Mirandized entail?
It entails what her rights are, that she doesn't have to talk to us. And so basically, in a nutshell, that's what it is. If she wanted to give us a statement, it was voluntary and not forced. That's her right not to. So
the Miranda is a constitutional requirement of somebody who's in custody and not free to leave to be advised of what their constitutional rights are before they make a statement, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and what are those constitutional rights that you or other deputies go over with someone before they are asked any questions?
Now you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. You have the right to answer questions, and you also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to an attorney.
Okay. And did you do that in this case before you asked any questions when you were in the interview room?
Yes.
Or Deputy Stauffer?
Yes.
Do you go over those rights in writing?
We do.
Okay, and did you do it that night?
Yes.
Page of your hand has been marked for purpose of identification, states exhibit number 3. Would you take a moment, look at that, and tell the jury what that is?
Yes, this is our constitutional rights and waiver form that we use at the Sheriff's Office. It's a common form that we have.
Okay, and have you seen that document before?
Yes.
And what specifically is it, and who's it for?
It's for Arbor Branch.
And it outlines what those constitutional rights are that you just testified to, correct?
It does.
And it is an acknowledgement of those rights and an agreement to speak and provide information to you, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that waiver signed by anybody?
It's signed by Audrey Branch.
Okay, did you see her sign that?
I did.
Okay, and it was witnessed by someone else?
Deputy Stauffer.
And Deputy Stauffer was also in the room at the time?
That's correct.
Okay. And so that is the waiver that was secured from the defendant that's seated in court, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was done before you asked any questions about what happened?
That's correct.
Was there any indication to you in going, that you observed in going over those rights with the defendant that she didn't understand them?
No, there was no indication that she didn't understand.
Did she have the opportunity to ask any questions?
She did.
Did she ask any questions about her rights?
I don't recall her asking any questions about her rights or...
Did she voluntarily sign that document?
She did.
Okay. Did she agree to talk to you?
She did.
Did she appear to understand what her rights were and that she understood what was being told of her?
She appeared to understand her rights.
Okay. And so did you then participate in an interview then?
I did, and we record our interviews, so it's audio and video recorded in the interview room.
Okay. And before you started the interview, could you describe the defendant's physical appearance? Did you have the occasion to see her?
Yeah, I mean, she was just kind of quiet, and I think she was tired, and her appearance, I mean, that's the first time I ever met her, so she seemed normal.
Okay. Do you recall what she was wearing, if anything?
They changed her out at the hospital to some different, like a hospital type pant, and we collected those clothing that she had as part of that forensic interview. or assessment that the hospital does. So I don't recall exactly what the clothing was that she had. It was like a sweatpant type shirt that she had on.
Okay. Was she wearing a mask?
Yes.
Okay, and was it a face mask, COVID related?
Yes.
Okay, had she been wearing the mask before?
She didn't wear it at the hospital, but she did wear it in the car on the way down and in the interview room.
Okay. And so she had it on in the interview room while you talked to her?
Yes.
Okay. And did she say if she wanted to wear a mask?
She wanted to.
Okay. Did she say why?
No.
Okay. Did you at that time have the occasion to observe any other injuries at that time?
No, I don't recall of any.
Okay. Did you look at her face?
She had the same, the injuries that I'd seen earlier on her forehead and
Okay.
such.
So, and that consisted of what?
She had if I recall, it was a place on her forehead that was like a cut or injury that had been bleeding and was treated at the hospital.
Okay. Did they bandage it?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay. So you don't remember she had a bandage. Okay. Was her neck immobilized in any way, like with a C-collar or some type of device? No. Okay. Okay. So, do you know about what time the interview started?
It was after 11 when we got back, and I think maybe 11:30 or so.
Okay. In the PM?
Yes.
Okay. And so, what, if anything, did you recall that the defendant told you?
I don't remember the exact details of what she said, other than he had shoved her down, and he left. She thought he was going out to his truck to retrieve a firearm, and she retrieved her rifle from under the bed, I believe, and the magazine to the rifle was in the closet. She retrieved it and loaded the gun. She thought he was coming back with the handgun that he kept in his truck.
Okay. Did you find any handgun at the scene near the body when you were there? Okay. And did you and another deputy, Deputy Stauffer, conducted the interview, correct?
Yes.
Were you the primary asking questions, or was Deputy Stauffer?
I let Deputy Stauffer, because he was at the crime scene, and so he knew more than I did from the search warrant and being with BCI.
Okay, fair enough. And so is that common practice, that there's somebody that takes the lead in questioning who may know more?
Yes.
Okay, so was your primary duty then to ask questions or to assist?
Assist.
Okay, and so would any specifics and questions would have been the responsibility of Deputy Stauffer?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there anything remarkable that the defendant told you that during the course of that interview that jumped out at you, that caused you to weigh in or ask any questions?
No. I think there was nothing that really stands out, but at one point in time, I think I did ask her about the ammunition being stored separate from the gun, and her having to retrieve that, but.
Okay. Do you recall specifically what question you asked about it?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you recall a response?
No, I don't.
Okay. About how long did that interview take?
It wasn't all that long of an interview, maybe a half hour.
Okay. Did the defendant admit she shot Matthew Michael Mott?
She did, and the one question I do recall that was asked is how many times she'd fired the weapon, and she said one time.
Okay. And did she identify what type of rifle?
AR-15.
Okay. Had you been aware of that that was the type of weapon involved?
Yeah, from the beginning, that she never said anything different than that.
Okay. All right. I have no other questions, John. Thank you.
All right, Major Graham. I want to talk to you about 3 different things, and then I'll be done, okay? First thing I want to talk to you about is the interview that you did with Audrey. The next thing I want to talk to you about is her injuries. And the last thing is your own experience in use of force, okay? Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. First, you testified, you interviewed, along with Mr. Stoffer, you interviewed Audrey.
Yes.
And this was all on video and audio.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you've been up here testifying, you've been having to try to recall bits and pieces of this, correct?
That's correct.
All right. That recording, that video and audio recording, the government has this, yes?
Yes.
Okay. It's still available. Jury could listen and watch it.
Yes.
Right. You wouldn't have to just simply rely on what you're trying to remember.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Next, Audrey's injuries. She wasn't taken out of there in a wheelchair.
No.
Not in a coma.
No.
Had all her teeth.
Yes.
She did have injuries, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank God it wasn't worse.
Excuse me.
So thank God it wasn't worse, correct?
Right.
The age of the building, that's what happens sometimes in the winter. So,
Radiators, bearings.
yeah, it's the way it is. So just have to work with it.
Okay, but she did have injuries.
She did have injuries.
Okay. To her head.
Yes.
It would be consistent with having been struck in her head.
I don't know how that occurred, but yeah, she had an injury on her forehead.
She told you she was struck in her head?
She knocked to the floor and her head was pushed into the drywall or into the wall. inside the house, in the bedroom.
But there was a hole in the wall where her head went through.
I wasn't in the house till after, days later. There was a hole in the drywall, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches up off the floor
Okay.
in the bedroom.
Which would be consistent with a head injury.
It's consistent with her statement.
Okay. And if somebody manipulated my head through a wall, is it fair to say I probably would have marks on my head?
Yeah, it would be consistent that you would have some type of injury.
Similarly, if somebody was punching me in my face or my head, I would have marks on my head?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You also acknowledged she had a pretty good-sized bruise on her arm, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it was in the back of her arm, right?
It was on the back side of the arm.
Okay. And she gave 2 different statements to you, right, on audio and video?
In the interview room, are you?
2 different occasions?
Yeah.
Okay. And both times, she told you that she had her arms up protecting herself, correct?
I don't recall that, to be honest with you.
But that's on video, right? Okay. You're a major, you've been around for a while, correct?
Yes.
All right. Do you train other officers?
No, I don't.
Okay. What type of training do you have in the use of force?
In relationship to law enforcement,
Yes.
you can only use the amount of force that's necessary or equal to resolve whatever's coming at you.
Okay. And you're familiar with responding to domestic violence situations, correct?
Yes,
All right. These are potentially dangerous situations for the officers, correct?
they are.
Okay. More than a typical call.
A lot of times.
Okay. When somebody gets physical with an officer, it's more dangerous than maybe just me and Steve getting into it in a fist fight, correct?
I'm not sure I follow you.
An officer brings a gun to every fight, correct?
Yes,
All right. That makes it more dangerous, doesn't it?
it does.
It's no longer just a fist fight.
Well, only if somebody tries to disarm us.
Okay, thank you. So if an officer were to get into a physical altercation with somebody else, your officer has a firearm on them, correct?
That's correct.
What happens if that firearm is taken from them?
If it's taken from you? Or from the officer?
From the officer.
It's probably gonna get shot with it.
Thank you.
Just 1 second.
You were asked a couple questions about the defendant's injuries and it being on video. Your interview was videoed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so that's what's recorded.
Yes,
Okay, but you also observe things. You don't rely on the video
That's correct.
as a playback. You also have your observations, is
that's
that correct?
correct.
I have no other questions.
Defense? Okay, Major Graham, thank you. You may step down. Okay, State of Ohio, it is 3:15, and I know we had the discussion during the break about witnesses today. Do you have any other available today that you would like to present?
We don't, Your Honor, due to scheduling. With this morning, we weren't in a position to know how long this morning's session would go, so everything else is scheduled for tomorrow. That's okay with the court.
Right. And jury, just so you know, we're moving along a little faster than anticipated, so we're actually through all the scheduled witnesses for today, which means we are going to take a break for the day at this point. And we're going to come back tomorrow morning, and we're going to be ready to go in your seats and ready to go at 8:30. Now, this morning we started late, and that's because there were about 12 people that we summoned out that didn't appear, prospective jury members, and so I waited a little while. We got started later than normal. So if you could be here on time tomorrow morning, we'll start right on time, and we'll be ready to go tomorrow morning. I do need you to remember everything I instructed you on as far as being at recess and talking about the case. You can't talk about it with friends, with family members. You still can't talk about the case in between even yourselves. And so please take that seriously. Also, all the instructions concerning media and looking up details of the case, or even just general research of the case, or maybe it has nothing specifically to do with the case, but evidence issues, things like that. You can't research them while you're out on a break. At this point, State, do you have any issues or any motions you'd like to address? No, sir. Anything from the defense? No, okay, very good. Then here's what we're going to do. We are at a recess for today. We'll be back at 8:30 in the morning. So, jury, thank you. You are released for the day.